poet or singer? You decide in 40 minutes on BBC One after Jonathan Ross does The Strip.
Sunset Strip has the right name. It's only when the sun goes down that the strip really comes to life. And like most creatures of the night, it's dark, dangerous and infinitely seductive. At less than 2 miles long, it really proves that size isn't everything. And as Hollywood's playground and home to LA's rock and roll scene, it's seen far more than its fair share of sexual scandal, substance abuse and downright debauchery.
This, my friend, is a strange place. Come with me now as I unfold the secret map of Sunset Strip to reveal the other side, the flip side of glittering Hollywood.
I like to reach under my bed and pull out $500,000 in cash, and I miss those days.
Police closed off all the streets to the Sunset Strip, and there were riots going down.
I had nothing to do with her death. Case closed.
The Strip is the short stretch of clubs, hotels and restaurants which squeeze onto LA's infamous Sunset Boulevard. The street will forever be associated with the film of the same name, one of the bitterest accounts ever of the dark, self-deceiving aspects of Hollywood.
What you're trying to say is you don't want me to love you. Say it. Say it.
In the 1940s and 50s, the Strip was where Hollywood showbiz set liked to show off and where reputations were often won and lost.
The former boss of Columbia Pictures, Harry Cohen, once said, if you must get into trouble, do it at the Chateau Marmont. Since 1929, the staff there have been famously discreet, turning a blind eye to the most outrageous behaviour. And as a favourite home away from home for many an unruly star, that famous discretion has been continually tested to the limit.
Appropriately enough, the Chateau Marmont was LA's first earthquake-proof building. Occasional guest Greta Garbo's penchant for slacks, smoking and same-sex companions certainly proved seismic, and there have been many other stars that have stayed here for whom the earth has also moved. In the hotel's fine tradition of boudoir hopping, an already married Jean Harlow was more than happy to go en suite with Clark Gable. While in bungalow number 2, Rebel Without a Cause director Nicholas Ray slept with his 15-year-old star Natalie Wood while she was dating co-star Dennis Hopper.
Why, in Rebel Without a Cause, I play a very bad girl.
Ray, meanwhile, was also having a fling with his other star, James Dean.
What?
More recently, Britney Spears and Colin Farrell and Scarlett Johansson and Benicio del Toro are among those alleged to have had libidinous liaisons here. While Johnny Depp gave new meaning to the term room service when he claimed to have had made love to Kate Moss in every room in the hotel. In 1982, however, when blues brother John Belushi checked out, he became a more tragic addition to the Marmont legend.
How would I characterize John Belushi? A little immature, a great talent, a man that got further with a pair of eyebrows than Marlene Dietrich.
He formed this new kind of comedy. I mean, his face when that eyebrow lifted, that was John. You know, he was just crazy, wonderful guy.
Belushi first found success as part of the original cast of groundbreaking sketch show Saturday Night Live. Then shot to fame playing Bluto in the college comedy Animal House.
All of his friends and the writers told me they wrote the role for Belushi.
Excuse me, sir, is this the Delta House? Sure.
Animal House was pivotal for his success, and it was definitely revolves around Bluto, even though dialogue-wise, he's probably only got about 12 lines.
That Jell-O scene was, you know...
I'm a zit. Get it?
Every man wanted to do that. Tiptoeing with the ladder to look in the girls' sorority house. It was a huge impact. From that point on, you couldn't go anywhere with him. Belushi stopped traffic cold. People would just stop their car, get out, and want to see him.
Already a much-loved comic and movie star, Belushi displayed his musical talents when he joined with Dan Aykroyd to form the Blues Brothers. Originally a warm-up act on Saturday Night Live, they soon found themselves with a cult movie classic.
He didn't want to be a movie star. He wanted to be a rock and roll star.
He loved being Jake Blues. In fact, most of the time, we didn't call John or Dan by John or Dan anymore. They were known as Elwood and Jake.
He had a childlike way of seeing things, which I think is great for comedy. You know, great appetite for life, exuberance, being rebellious. You know, those qualities about him were both good and bad.
The early 70s into the early 80s was really a crazy time. I mean, everyone did drugs. And in the end, it just did John in because he was an obsessive personality.
He was one of those guys that was truly addicted. He couldn't stop. And you became more of a minder than you did a friend.
Former kickboxing champion Bill Wallace was hired to help with the increasingly hopeless task of minding Belushi.
The first night when we were at the blues bar, some guy comes and says, "Hi, my name is such and such and such and such." He holds his hand and shakes my hand. When I pull my hand back, I get about 2 vials of cocaine in my hand. He says, "Tell John I said hi."
In his final months, Belushi spent much of his time on Sunset Strip, living in a private bungalow at the Chateau Marmont and partying in the street's notorious rock clubs.
As he was going to California in those very last months, and I was staying in New York, it was difficult because I knew he was sort of spinning out of control.
He had a trainer with him, but he'd slip out on them too. "I'm going out for a while." And he'd go out. Not for drugs all the time, but most of the time, I guess.
If somebody doesn't want you to be around them, there are places that they can go, things that they can do to where, believe me, you won't be around them.
People were saying he's going to kill himself. He was just ingesting everything he could get his hands on, every drug. He had to go to every party, drinking all the time, eating as much as he possibly could in between the drugs. He just didn't draw the line. He lived to excess.
On the night of March the 4th, 1982, Belushi was seen at his favourite haunts, the Roxy and the Rainbow, before returning to the Chateau Marmont with a woman named Kathy Smith.
Kathy Evelyn Smith, I never met, never saw, didn't know who she was, and then started to hear the stories.
He got involved with someone who used heroin, and obviously he was curious enough about it to be wanting to try it. He needed someone else at that point to do that stuff, though.
The next morning, I called John's room. There was no one picked up the phone, so I called the trainer. And I said, "Hey, they're going to wake up John."
I go knock on the door, nothing. I have a key. I see John laying in the bedroom. I shake him, nothing. I shake him and he rolls over on his back and his arm goes like that. And I see 2 to 3 needle marks in his arm.
Then Bill Wallace called and said he was gone. I said, "Where'd he go?" You know, who knew? I know he's dead. Oh, God, it was terrible. Terrible.
Belushi died from a fatal mix of heroin and cocaine injected by Kathy Smith. When she returned to the chateau that morning, she was arrested and later charged with murder.
I think Belushi killed himself. I don't think his drug dealer should have been jailed for anything but drug dealing. I don't think she killed him in any way.
Kathy Smith was sentenced to 18 months for manslaughter, and Belushi's body was flown home to New York for the funeral.
Dan and I had to carry him off the plane, and he and I were both hysterically crying, you know. And we said, "Is this what cocaine does?" And we both looked at each other like 2 old guys. We felt very old. And said, "Obviously so," and I never did it again.
John had a way of making people feel alive. So when he was pulled away, it made you feel real empty. If there's any way that that part of John's life can be an illustration to the downside of drug use, then I hope it helps.
The Chateau Marmont is one of the oldest surviving buildings on the Strip, which has always been home to some of Hollywood's greatest landmarks. Schwab's drugstore and coffee shop was the hangout for wannabe actors, and according to legend, where Lana Turner was discovered. It was here, too, under the light of Schwab's neon sign, that songwriter Howard Arlen penned a bittersweet classic immortalised by Judy Garland. Joni Mitchell's song, Big Yellow Taxi, mourned the demolition of the Garden of Allah. Glamorous star-filled apartments where Frank Sinatra first wooed Ava Gardner and Humphrey Bogart canoodled with Lauren Bacall. When resident Charles Lawton was filming his classic, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, he could often be found relaxing in the pool, using Quasimodo's hump as a makeshift float. The Garden of Allah opened in 1918 with an 18-hour party, and the carousing continued for 41 years. When it was eventually demolished, there was an auction of Allah memorabilia, and fittingly, Errol Flynn's bed, the scene of many amorous conquests, was the most sought-after lot. Further down the Strip was Dean Martin's eatery, Dino's Lodge, which was immortalised in the 60s TV series 77 Sunset Strip. And a short jaywalk across the street was the Villanova restaurant, where Marilyn Monroe met Joe DiMaggio on a blind date. It's now the Rainbow Bar and Grill, which, along with the Whiskey A Go-Go, forms the cornerstones of the Strip's infamous rock block.
The sweet and sour smell of excess has always hung over Sunset Strip, but until the 1960s, the stars always dressed for dinner, and the bad behaviour didn't begin until somewhere around the dessert course. Then, in 1964, the Whiskey A Go-Go opened, offering a heady cocktail of live music and go-go dancers. The stars moved out, the rockers moved in, and decadence on the Strip reached an all-time high.
The Whiskey Go-Go was the first disco in the United States, and we started that in 1964. We had the girls in the cages, and then we had a psychedelic show also. All crazy stuff.
LA had never seen anything like it before. It had these go-go dancers on either side of the stage in these skimpy little outfits with long boots and mini skirts, and it was kind of a wild scene.
It was a smash from opening night. And it was a great combination because the music never stopped. I mean, it went from me playing live to records.
It was kind of a square music scene. It didn't become hippies until actually the Byrds came around in 65, 66.
Yeah, I was flabbergasted when I saw those guys because they were doing things that I was writing about at the time. And when I saw them, it just blew me away.
The Byrds inspired other folk rock acts, from Arthur Lee's Love to the Mamas and the Papas, and Sunset Strip became a hippie haven for America's disaffected youth.
Sunset Strip was like its own type of love-in. There was, pretty indiscriminate, wild things going on, but it was all about peace and love and joy and sharing. Us against them, though. There was a bunch of that.
Unfortunately, the Strip's older generation weren't too happy with the proliferation of pot-smoking longhairs, and the police moved in to close down popular hippie hangout Pandora's Box.
I remember it coming down from my house in the Hollywood Hills to try to get down to the Strip one night, and the street I tried to get on had red road flares across it. And so I went to the next street, and it had red road flares across it. Turned out that there were riots going down on the streets.
What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there.
There's a song by Buffalo Springfield, Stop, Hey, What's That Sound? Everybody look what's going down. It was about the riots. And it was a big deal.
And it became the turning point between kind of the hip scene and the square scene in LA, where they were us and them. Basically, it turned out there were a lot more of us than them eventually.
With the teen takeover of the Strip complete, the Whiskey became the focal point of the growing new music scene.
Every night there was some amazing talent. The Doors could be up there one night, or Jimi Hendrix, or it was just, the talent was just nonstop.
To see Zeppelin in a club that small, and Janis Joplin, and the Doors were the house band, and, you know, craziness.
When the music's over.
First time I ever saw Jim Morrison, he pretended to be a heckler in a band, and he was yelling at the 3 other members to get off the stage, and where was the singer? And nobody knew it was him, that he was heckling his own band.
Before I sing into the big sleep.
One night he climbed up on stage with the 1910 Fruit Gum Company. Well, they were a really square band. They just did not know what to do. And he grabbed the mic and stuck the microphone down inside of his trousers. He often did stuff like that.
Music is your special friend.
I used to grab that guy and I said, "What's wrong with you?" You know, now you look up and say, "Oh, Mario, I love you," and that's all you got out of the poor guy.
Jesus, save us!
He was a serious alcoholic. One night I saw him trying to sleep in the gutter in front of the Whiskey, kind of curling up, wanting to just leave me alone to go to sleep. It got pretty sad.
Following the success of the Whiskey, in 1972, the owners created 2 more rock venues just down the block, the Roxy and the Rainbow Bar and Grill.
Led Zeppelin used to party here, and one day I was walking through the dining room there, and I saw about 4 heels sticking out because they had the long tablecloths there, and I always wondered, what the hell were them girls doing under there? But you can figure that out, you know.
When Zeppelin came, it was like the whole rock and roll tom-tom drum started beating weeks ahead, and they're closer, oh my God.
They had like 8 limousines parked in front of the Hyatt House, and they took the whole 9th floor, and the decadence was just unbelievable.
And girls would do things with Zeppelin they just wouldn't even dream of doing with anyone else. But they were so much bigger than life and so different from what we were used to.
English bands were considered exotic. So if you had bad teeth and you had a wife at home and you were really pale, then that was really a male beauty for California groupies.
And the glittering prize for the Strip's top groupies was guitarist Jimmy Page.
I started modeling around 13, and that's how Jimmy Page found me, because he saw me in this magazine and said, "Oh, I have to meet her."
One night he said, "What if I was to marry you, Miss P?" "Oh, I shouldn't say that." And I found out later, of course, he said the same thing to all the girls. But at the time, you think, wow, Jimmy Page loves me.
Zeppelin may have been the undisputed rock gods of the Strip in the 70s, but a decade later, one band of poodle-haired rockers were determined to take debauchery to a whole new Olympian level.
Our whole thing with our image was, the bigger we could make our hair, the more shitty we could look, it was the better for us,
Kids thought that this was like the evil people and all this kind of stuff.
Mickey was this like big voodoo doll on stage, this like so evil, and they were so loud.
Motley's songs were heavily influenced by their life on the Sunset Strip, where they lived in a house just stumbling distance from the Whiskey.
They had a dungeon in the basement. It was pretty insane.
It wasn't unusual to walk out and see, 2 girls in the hallway, passed out, naked, and broken bottles and pizza boxes, and Tommy's like having sex with some girl that just, just threw up. I mean, it was just like that.
The biggest party was in the parking lot of Rainbow every night. That's where everybody congregated, grabbed their people, and went to their houses.
We always tried to go where the crew guys were going because you knew that's where the girls would be.
Everybody would switch girls and partners, and then you go to another place and more debauchery until you passed out, and then you woke up and you were with someone you didn't know, and it was just sex, debauchery all the time, every day.
Everybody was doing blow and acid and all that kind of stuff. It's just, when it got into the later 80s and started into the heroin scene,
is when it just really deteriorated.
Nobody wants to just have one line of cocaine. It's like just putting a drop of gasoline in a race car. You want to fill the tank, and that's the nature of drug addiction.
He actually OD'd, and he flatlined, and they brought him back. And you would have thought that would have taught somebody a lesson, but Nicky was probably, well, that was pretty cool.
But eventually, even the Motley boys had to grow up.
You get a little bit older and you start to see some things that you need to be responsible for. And I think I realized that.
A new Motley movie is currently in production, so you'll be able to relive their wild side sometime next year. The crew may have survived, but the Strip's rock and roll scene has claimed some high-profile victims. At the Viper Rooms, once owned by Johnny Depp, 23-year-old actor River Phoenix dropped dead in the doorway in 1993. And it's a fair guess that industrial quantities of illegal substances have been slipped by the doorman at the Hyatt Hotel. Favoured by rock stars in the 70s, it became better known as the Riot House, where Keith Richards initiated the great rock tradition of throwing a TV over the hotel balcony. Right across the road is another of the Strip's infamous rock venues, and it's here that Hollywood's latest and biggest celebrity scandal began.
The House of Blues, owned by surviving blues brother Dan Aykroyd, was founded as a shrine to the music of the Deep South, complete with corrugated iron exterior and voodoo motifs. Upstairs, the exclusive foundation room is reserved for A-listers only. And it was there on the night of February the 3rd, 2003, that actress Lana Clarkson met eccentric record producer Phil Spector. A few hours later, she was found dead, shot in the mouth, in the hallway of Spector's home.
Shortly after 5 o'clock this morning, Alhambra police officers responded to this residence. Mr. Philip Spector from Motown Records has been taken into custody and is being detained at Alhambra Police Department.
When Phil Spector was charged with murder, it rekindled massive interest in a reclusive figure who many consider to be the greatest music producer of all time.
I was aware of Phil when I was a little kid, 10-year-old kid, hearing Be My Baby by the Ronettes, the Crystals, and the Righteous Brothers. And there was always a style to it that you knew it was Phil.
It was a wonderful sound. I remember all these great walls of guitars and clapping and singing and harmonies, and loved Phil Spector's production style. It was amazing.
Spector began his pop career performing with the Teddy Bears, but soon realised he had a far greater destiny as the tycoon of teen.
I was in the Teddy Bears for 3 miserable months. No, I don't miss that at all. No, I like being Cecil B. DeMille.
So Spector moved behind the mixing desk and broke all the rules of record production to create what he called little symphonies for the kids.
I don't know what I did that was different per se. I just heard something different in my head. So I thought to myself, I'll just get somebody who doesn't watch that needle, and I'll just put 6 guitars until it sounds right. And if we all have to stand in the room to do it, we'll all stand in the room to do it.
Most of the time, Phil would have us do 30 takes. One take 2 was the best. But he was trying some different things, and we all realized that he liked to mess around a little bit with the sound. And we knew every time that we would work for him that it would be a hit record.
His run of hits came to an abrupt end, however, when his masterwork, River Deep, Mountain High, was a surprising flop in the US, sending Spector into semi-retirement. Since then, he's worked sporadically with artists including the Beatles, the Ramones, and most recently, Star Sailor, but has made the headlines more often for the wrong reasons, and never more so than now.
I'll be no man's slave and no man's whore.
Like many young women, Lana Clarkson came to Los Angeles as an aspiring actress. With her striking good looks, she stood out among the other Hollywood hopefuls.
She walked into my office right out of a film noir novel.
There was this magnificent creature, 6-foot-tall blonde in her 20s, just flawless.
Lana was old-time Hollywood. She was out of the 50s in many ways, and she would never walk out of her house if she didn't look like $1 million. That was Lana.
Her fame is because of director Roger Corman casting her in the Barbarian Queen movies. And to this day, she's part of science fiction lore. You know, she is the Barbarian Queen.
No man can touch her naked steel. No man can shatter her sacred shield. Oh, no! Barbarian Queen brought cult success, but Clarkson was determined to prove she was a serious actress, working on stage with Oscar nominee Sally Kirkland.
It's not often you see someone who looks like that, who can actually deliver, who can do what I call emotional range. And she had been working her butt off for years and years and years. And sometimes it was television, sometimes it was movies, sometimes it was industrial, sometimes it was modeling, but she was always staying in the loop.
Still waiting for her big break, in 2003, Clarkson took a part-time job as the VIP host at the Strip's House of Blues.
She was in a very powerful position in the foundation room. She knew how to handle celebrities. She knew what they wanted, who they were, how to take care of their little quirks and their problems.
And she was so excited. She said, I'm meeting such great people, and she started naming all these names. And I'm God's honest truth. I don't know whether she said, I met Phil Spector or I'm going to meet Phil Spector. But it was like somewhere in that area. And she was excited because she thought he was so talented.
On the night of the death of Lana Clarkson, Phil Spector was at Dan Tana's. And then he moved on to the House of Blues on Sunset. And he picked up this movie actress, you know, a few drinks, and then, you know, off to his castle up in Alhambra. Next thing you know, the chauffeur calls the police and says there's been gunfire, and as you know, the police arrived and shots had been fired and this woman was dead.
The officers came up towards the back of the residence, and when they looked in the back door, they saw Miss Clarkson inside a foyer area, and they also saw Phil Spector.
They behaved like cowboys. I had no weapon. I'm 5'5". They came in with weapons drawn. There wasn't one of them under 6 foot tall. There was not a medic to be seen.
They gave some directions to Mr. Spector, which it appears he did not comply with.
They tasered me with 50,000 volts of electricity, which in the police manual says you never do that to a suspect unless he is violent or uncontrollable.
He was taken into custody, arrested and booked at the Alhambra Police Department for murder.
Spector was released on $1 million bail, but after an 8-month investigation was recharged and is currently awaiting trial.
The autopsy surgeon said that Miss Clarkson died as a result of a homicide. We made the determination after viewing the evidence that it was a murder.
There's no motive for him to kill her. He had just met this woman that night. You know, it doesn't make sense. What does make sense is that she committed suicide.
A tragedy happened, but it could have happened in anybody's house. It's not for me to explain why she took her life. It's only for me to explain that I had nothing to do with it, and I didn't.
She had gunshot residue, multiple particles of gunshot residue on both of her hands.
Well, of course she had gunshot residue on her. She was shot.
The recoil of the gun knocked out her 2 front teeth. If the teeth break from the back to the front, that's consistent with a gun placed in her mouth, which is a classic suicide.
When they say that she was suicidal, excuse me, she was not suicidal. This was the opposite of what she was.
We do have an email that she sent to one of her friends, which is, to me, a clear declaration that, you know, she was contemplating suicide.
Of course, the defense claims the evidence will show one thing. We're saying no, it won't, but we'll wait for court to work that one out.
A trial by media, however, had already begun, with both Clarkson and Spector's reputations being dragged through the dirt.
Many people in the music business, in the movie business, all said, Phil Spector, guns, girl dead in his house.
One such story is that when working with the Ramones, Spector held the bassist, Dee Dee, at gunpoint to force the band to continue working.
He didn't point any gun at Dee Dee. He didn't point a gun. He had guns. Whether you take it out and use it is another story.
Rumours are also circulating that Lana Clarkson worked as a high-class call girl for a top Hollywood madam.
Why does the fact that Lana Clarkson worked for my service make her less of a victim? That is what I have to say about that, if that tells you anything.
She was no call girl. And she's up in heaven and she can't say, excuse me, I was a model, you know?
I know it's going to get dirty because they have to. That's the only way they could possibly convince a jury to have some kind of sympathy for Phil Spector.
At this point, most people in Hollywood think that Phil Spector is responsible for her death one way or another, but we just don't know the circumstances. Was it some kind of sex game? Was he just angry? Was he showing off and being a big shot? Was it an accident? Was it deliberate? We really don't know.
This prosecution is bogus. I mean, it has to be because of who I am. It has to be because I live in a castle. It has to be a frame-up because it's not based on real evidence.
Physical evidence doesn't lie, and I truly believe that the physical evidence is what will result in Phil's exoneration.
The bottom line is the jurors are going to be the triers of the case, and they'll make a determination whether or not Mr. Spector is innocent or guilty.
I had nothing to do with her death, and 3 coroners have stated that. Case closed. Move on. You know, forget Phil Spector, forget the castle, forget rock and roll, forget all that.
Spector has recently hired his 3rd new legal team. If he's found guilty, he could face 25 years to life. The Strip has long been home to LA's oldest criminal activity. In the 1930s, number 8439 Sunset Boulevard was Hollywood's best-known brothel, where Errol Flynn was a frequent visitor. It's along here, at the low-rent end of the Strip, that Hugh Grant was arrested for dallying with Divine Brown, while just around the corner on Santa Monica Boulevard, Eddie Murphy was kind enough to offer a lift to a transsexual prostitute in the early hours of the morning. But in Hollywood, there's no need to cruise the streets for takeaway, because there's always someone willing to deliver direct to your door.
On Sunset Strip, madam is not a polite form of address, it's a job description. Here at On the Rocks, Hollywood's most famous madam, Heidi Fleiss, used to audition girls, and with the promise of $10,000 a night, she was rarely short of applicants. While Hugh Grant may have been content to cruise the streetwalkers at the seedier end of the Strip, Hollywood leading men generally prefer a higher class of call girl, and Hollywood madams have always been here to service their sexual proclivities.
Madams have been around in Hollywood since day one. I mean, they're an important part of every community where men reside with money. As long as there are rich men, you're going to have madams making money from them.
Hollywood is a company town. And in order to make a deal happen, you have the hooker, the drugs, the dinners, the whatever, the limo, the whole thing makes Hollywood happen. It greases the wheel.
Heidi Fleiss was Hollywood's most notorious madam until her arrest in 1993.
The day after I was arrested, I remember sitting by my pool, looking over the whole entire city and feeling this big. And I was like, how did I mess up the best job on earth?
Fortunately, Jodie Baby Doll Gibson was ready to slip into Heidi's stilettos, a recording artist by day and Madame Sasha by night.
Nobody in the entertainment business knew that I was running this empire as Sasha, and nobody that I worked with in my escort empire had any idea that I was appearing on radio and television as Baby Doll. So I literally was leading this double life for about 12 years.
Charlie Sheen admitted to spending $50,000 in 1 year on some of Heidi's hookers. And by the way Charlie described it, It was a hell of a lot of fun. What he said was, I don't pay them to come here. I pay them to leave here.
I love how the guy says, oh, we pay for them to leave. What a lie that is. That's a male ego. They pay for the sure thing, and that's the bottom line. They're paying for the sure thing.
It's the convenience of being able to get what they want, when they want it, at the time they want it. What a luxury that is.
Major celebrities love call girls because they figure, what the heck, why not? I don't need a girlfriend 24 hours a day. I just want one tonight.
A typical girl I would like would be, say, a girl who looked like she just walked off the cover of 17 magazine. She looked like someone you could take to a party at the White House, but she would turn into, woo, some big porno star in the bedroom. And I think that's every man's fantasy in a way.
Sadly, all good things come to an end, and when Heidi was arrested, Hollywood began to panic.
The minute the Hollywood Madam scandal broke, everybody in town, myself included, were panting after Heidi's little black book. And believe me, there were men of power in this town who were quaking in their boots.
Heidi, are you going to name names? A lot of people thought that Heidi Fleiss should not have been locked up because they feel the men should be punished as well. But Hollywood managed to cover up that list of male names. And I guess Heidi took the fall, and she really shouldn't have.
Guilty of the crime of pandering by security. Well, it was a very elaborate operation to get me arrested. It involved the FBI, the IRS, the ATF. A lot of money went into stopping some fancy girls having sex with fancy men.
After 12 years in the business, Jodie Baby Doll Gibson was also caught in a sting operation.
My case cost the state, according to the Los Angeles Times, $1 million, if you can believe that. But, what are we really talking about? We're not talking about pedophilia. We're not talking about heroin. We're talking about high-profile guys having sex with gorgeous girls, and, it's titillating. It's interesting. It's fascinating to most people.
Baby Doll served 2 years in jail on pandering charges, while Heidi was eventually sentenced for tax evasion.
I appreciate the lower term. I served 3 years in the penitentiary. I was out hustled there, and I was out of my league, but I just did what I had to do and did my 3 years, and it was hard. But hey, it's over with, and that's that. Hey!
Fortunately for Hollywood madams, serving men, then serving time, just doubles the job opportunities. Heidi Fleiss has a new book, Pandering, and some ambitious plans for the future.
Of course, I have some long-term goals, which are politics, naturally. I can relate to all types of people.
I have been following you since you...
Come on, the bottom of the barrel and the top cream of the crop. I've been there.
Jodie Baby Doll Gibson has just shown her first designer clothing line, and she too has a book ready for publication. And of course, there's the inevitable movie deal, if the price and star are right.
I would love to see Mira Sorvino. It's not a part for every actress because she would have to encapsulate my lively, upbeat pop personality by day, but then the very definite, ruthless escort personality which I had to incur running that business by night.
Nicole Kidman is the only person I would choose. I mean, how could you have Gwyneth Paltrow, who has a nervous breakdown because she won an Academy Award? My God. Well, imagine she was under my kind of pressure.
So, with both Heidi and Jodie seemingly going straight, who's the madam now?
As long as there's people with money and men with fantasies, there are going to be call girls who will service them and madams who will supply the call girls. It's show business.
Some say that Sunset Strip these days is a shadow of its former self, but it's a long shadow. There are still rich, famous people with money to burn, a reputation to maintain, and everything to lose who come here and blow the lot. Which makes me think that if you are going to do the Strip, do it on a budget. Because once you run out of cash, Sunset Strip can't wait to see the back of you.
I'm going down to the Strip tonight.
Well, Jonathan's in Beverly Hills next Wednesday at 10:40 on BBC One. This is all right for some. Next this evening from Rat Tonight, is Bob Geldof saint or singer?
It's causing all the action.